Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD on Twitter, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports: How to Think Like a Professional DFS Player. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass available at theoryofdfs.com. It applies to any sport: NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, esports even. It is the overall game theory of daily fantasy sports broken down into 10 plus chapters involving leverage, correlation, lineup construction, risk management, all of the general concepts and theory of playing the game on a professional level as a profitable player. So go check that out. It's available now. And on this podcast, we typically cover broad subjects, the application of the theory as it relates to past slates or in general trends in the DFS industry amongst any sport. And join with me the newly married Erik Beimfohr, who probably I'm going to assume paid more attention to your wedding than your Sunday NFL lineups.
I did. I pretty much spent the weekend laying on my couch and recovering from a fun couple of days, but it was good. Yeah, it's like bittersweet, right? That was like my few days away from DFS for the last since I guess sports came back. And it was kind of nice, like not talking to all these shit bums on Twitter and like not dealing with people in Slack and Discord and just like escaping from the world and having a good time, with friends and family. It was great. But I'm also like kind of excited, get back into the group. It's what I enjoy doing. So I'm happy to be back.
And they announced that NBA opening
Yeah.
opening is December 22nd, so we won't really have a dead period in between. I mean, we never were. I mean, we expected them to start in January at least. So, I mean, you get playoff slates, but I mean, as far as the end of DFS, the end of NFL DFS, as far as like classic slates with a lot of
Hmm.
games on it, corresponding with NBA, we go just right into it, and we'll be doing this podcast every week, and kind of maybe transition over to concepts as it relates to NBA slates more
Hmm.
than not, and especially we'll probably be talking a lot about late swap
Yeah.
when it comes to NBA, or how to react to news and how the field reacts to news more so than we do NFL. But just to preview next week's podcast, I'm going to assume that because this very unique NFL slate coming up this coming Sunday, where there's 5 early games and 6 late games. We usually get like the skew where it's like 8-3 or 9-2, where the
Right.
late games are like, oh, like you're watching Red Zone and they could barely find some place to go for the coverage. I think both the early and late slates make for good GPP slates because at least there's
Hmm.
there's more games, and I think looking at your lineup for the main classic slate, you have to be a lot more cognizant of optionality than you would be.
Yep. Which we talked, we've talked about. Was that last episode or the episode before? I don't know. I have a terrible memory of keeping those things straight, but I think it's a really, really important factor. We went pretty in depth on it before, and like people think about late swap, probably too simply. Whereas going into a slate like we have this coming week, it's almost as important. Like you said, optionality and all these, I like call them if then statements, right? Like, depending on how my slate starts or depending on how the plays that I play work out to start versus how the plays that I don't play work out. So like this past week, as an example, if we had the 6 or 7 games on the afternoon slate this past week, and you played Dalvin Cook, you're in a very different situation than if you didn't play Dalvin Cook. And but like a lot of people, and like even people that I talk to, they're like freaking out about this at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Like, oh, and your mind's not like there. You're not ready to make those decisions. So like I think it's really important, kind of this next level GPP strategy of going into the slate and already having like this plan of attack for all these different variables, as opposed to just picking your best plays and then then even if you are going to be the 1% of people that use late swap, it's just like a panic swap, as opposed to going in with a sound plan to really maximize your EV on a slate.
Yeah, I made that mistake this past slate. I made the exact mistake. It wouldn't have mattered. Okay, let me just put it at, no matter what I've done, I wouldn't have gotten to the cash line with my main lineup. I horrible. I mean, when all your players get injured, it ends up happening that way. But I made the decision not to play Dalvin Cook in cash games, to go for the cheaper running back build and pay up at wide receiver, which I don't think is, I think is perfectly viable. You can make the case that punting one of your wide receiver slots with like a Marcus Johnson type was, him plus Cook was better than a cheap running back plus a mid-range wide receiver. We can make that argument all you want. But the thing that I didn't take into account enough was I knew Dalvin Cook would be chalk in cash games. And I should have left myself more than one slot for the late games, because I was considering, I've always said, even this year, that Tyler Lockett is not like, he's very volatile. People look at him as, good game environment. He's 6,800. He projected as the second highest wide receiver on the slate. So Julio was 1, Lockett was 2, and Allen was 3. Allen's in the late game. I should have, instead of played Lockett, played Allen if I was fading Dalvin Cook, because then at least I know what Cook's score is. But I thought of that, but then I thought, well, now I'm also fading a chalky Tyler Lockett.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily mind that as much, because you had Keenan Allen there anyway. So it's like, well, I mean, I'm expecting Keenan Allen to get 12 targets regardless in that game. So worst case scenario, I could match Lockett's score. But now I'm leaving myself, when I play Lockett and no Cook, I just have one slot in my flex. Like I have no wiggle room. If I have Justin Jackson in my flex and Allen in my wide receiver slot, I could then at least see what was the ownership on Lockett, what was the ownership on Julio, so I could gauge Allen ownership, right? Because then I could still leave it with Allen and just say, well, Lockett got 8 points. Let me play Allen, because I could see that Allen's going to come in at like 15 to 20% owned and not 30 to 35% owned. And I'm gaining leverage because I need points that I didn't get from Cook. And that would be, it still wouldn't have mattered. I mean, like, even that 20-point difference wouldn't have got me there either. So, like, I'm not going by the results. I'm just going by, like, the mindset was that if I'm going to fade a ceiling player, which is at 8,200, Dalvin Cook, has a ceiling. From a median perspective, I thought I could build a better lineup without him. From a median perspective, of course, the 70-yard touchdown run on top of his 28 points, like that sealed the deal there. But it gives me more information. If Cook ended up with 20 points, like now at least, if 20 points for Cook and 8 for Lockett, it's like, okay, now I'm good. Now I'm going to play Keenan Allen. I'm going to block Justin Jackson, and I should be good at that point. But I've not left myself the opportunity to make that decision. Now, if I'm fading someone that's not going to be high chalk, like if I'm going to fade, I mean, it could be like Noah Fant or her, like one of the tight ends, where I didn't think that it's going to be ridiculous ownership or anything, especially tight ends or defenses or even quarterback, right? Like like if I play Drew Lock instead of Josh Allen, I mean, they're both at the same time. Like they're not high enough owned. Like Cook was high enough owned that if given the choice between Lockett and Allen being there close enough together, I think I should have sided for optionality instead of just, well, if I'm not going to play Cook, at least let me play Lockett, because he's also going to be like 50% owned in cash. That I played too much. I played too conservatively. Like if once I decide to fade Cook, I should just be like, well, I'm off most likely the chalk build. So I might as well just be off the chalk build and not even bother play Lockett, and just I'll let it be a 4v4 rather than a 2v2 in the case that, do you understand what I'm saying? Like if I'm going to be, if I'm knowingly going to be off the chalk build, I'd rather be off the chalk build at a 4v4 level than a 2v2 level.
It's two things. I think the first is people will make those decisions kind of like the process of what you were deciding on, like Lockett versus Allen and all that. So you had already made that decision on Dalvin, and people will then not take the rest of their lineup into account when they're making that decision. Even for cash, people actually probably do it more for tournaments because they're cognizant of stacking and all that shit. But in cash, people will think about the Lockett thing and Lockett versus Allen thing and just think literally in a vacuum between those two guys. The range of outcomes, ownership, whatever. And those things are clearly important. You just outline them and why. But that last factor of I'm already off of this chalk build that I expect an overwhelming majority of my opponents to have. I've pulled that first lever, right? I've pulled that first lever moving away from this chalk build. So I should then I need to pull these other levers to give once I've already moved off of that build, I can't be afraid to utilize these other levers, which is kind of basically like waiting, right? I'm waiting to get as much information as I can with a very similar play. Okay, Lockett projects for a point more or whatever. That doesn't really matter. But what does matter once you've already pulled that first lever is now having access to more information, because that you're different. Now it's a case of I need to understand when the 4 p.m. games hit, where do I stand and what decisions do I need to make? And so that's that last little, 1 out of 4 levers that people don't typically pull in cash games that you did 2 weeks ago or whatever that that worked for you. And a lot of people did, right? With various different swaps. Everybody had different things, whether there was like Metcalf and DJ Dallas, all that shit. But this week was a week that I don't, we talked extensively about it. And this week it was a little tougher because of the afternoon games that we had, but it was still available. Like you said, there was Keenan Allen. Obviously, Justin Jackson was one of the highest owned players on the slate. There was, the Cardinals Dolphins game had playable pieces. And then there's other Chargers options or Josh Jacobs. The list goes on and on. There were actually options, just people didn't feel as comfortable with them. So I don't think people considered it necessarily enough. I mean, I only played I actually played some cash, and I had the same thing, but I did play Dalvin, so I wasn't sweating it. But I didn't consider it a ton for tournaments either. I did look at some swap options. I had 2 players late. But I think it was just, and most people didn't think about it as much this week. So now we'll bounce back to week 10 or whatever, where it should be fresh on everybody's mind. There's a shit ton of afternoon games, and you are really going to have to be thinking about it.
Right, because with one slot I had available at 4,900, it's Jackson, Ruggs. I mean, if I had Allen there, I could have swapped flex to James Conner. Put Mike Williams in the wide receiver slot. I mean, because he still had that Pittsburgh-Dallas game. We still had the notion that we think Zeke is playing, but who knows? Maybe at 3:00, he's not good. And now Pollard becomes available, and then you pivot off of Jackson to him. You still have Deontay Johnson. You could play in a flex. I mean, there were options. Christian Kirk, if needed, right? Christian Kirk had a great game. I could have done that. But with only one slot, you can't go up and it's just you're stuck in that spot. And if I'm choosing if I don't believe Lockett and Allen have that big of a difference, I should have sided with optionality, even though my projections would say that Lockett is nearly a point higher in median and obviously twice as owned. So I didn't want to come across as the week before as well, I'm so smart, I made late swaps and I'm better than you, or I planned for it, but it's no, I made a mistake. I made it, and it still wouldn't have mattered. So it's not I would have won a little bit more of my head-to-heads, but I still would have had a big losing week. But I think that I wanted to highlight on this past week a concept that we cover in the psychology chapter of the course, which you can get at theoryofdfs.com, and it's probably the biggest hurdle for most DFS players, whether or not you're experienced or not. I mean, we succumb to this regardless, and that's confirmation bias. Confirmation bias before a slate and confirmation bias after a slate. And it's very similar. This bias that I'm going to talk about now is probably related to sampling bias as well as survivorship bias. And it comes into like I'm gonna read off. And I'm not saying these things as a knock on all the shows that I've listened to last week, but I made a list of all the things that I heard multiple times on industry podcast analysts, season long DFS, and I mean I listen to fantasy football in general of people analyzing the football games as opposed to playing DFS as a strategy game. So Dalvin Cook, well, the Detroit run defense is horrible, right? So you got to play Dalvin Cook. It doesn't 8,200, 82,000. You got to play Dalvin Cook. James Conner, the Dallas run defense is awful, right? The Dallas defense in general is awful. You got to play James Conner. How is he not a lock? Okay. Well, obviously Cook destroyed the Detroit run defense, so that happened. Pittsburgh got down to Dallas as a huge favorite, and Conner was barely on the field. He ended up with 4 points. We had what's going to happen with Golladay out, with Quintus Cephas being active. Is Cephas going to step in? We saw those 2 games at the beginning of the season. Cephas, Marvin Hall was just special teams. But since in the last game, Cephas was inactive, Hall got Galladay's role because who else is going to get it? Because they don't have another wide receiver. It turns out that it didn't matter. Amendola got those targets. So it didn't matter who you picked. Marvin Hall actually got more routes, I believe, but it didn't even matter. Blake is Ridley's direct backup, right? We saw in the past games that when Jones is out, Zacchaeus comes in. When Ridley comes out, Blake comes in. When Gage comes out, Powell comes in. Well, apparently this game, Zacchaeus comes in no matter what. And Blake got, 8 snaps, five routes or something?
Yeah.
And Zacchaeus is the one with the 100-yard game and a touchdown. But I heard that multiple times. Christian Blake. He's going to, because based on these 2 games, we're going to go base all of our thing on these 2 games. Marcus Johnson is going to get T.Y. Hilton's routes, right? Marcus Johnson was the cheap wide receiver, and that ended up being true. He actually got a ton of air yards and just didn't, they didn't connect. But that actually turned out to be correct. Johnson got most of the work. Here's the one you heard probably more than anything else. You got to play Lockett against the Buffalo slot funnel, right? Tre'Davious White shadow coverage on Metcalf. How do you play Metcalf? You got to play Lockett over. Obviously, they're going to throw to Lockett because White's going to lock down Metcalf. What happened? Turns out White didn't shadow Metcalf, and even if he did, Metcalf beat him anyway. So Metcalf had way more points than Lockett has the snowflake. You can't play Terry McLaurin against Bradbury Shadow, right? Like he's gonna or whatever on his side. McLaurin had a monster game with 20s. Of course, it mostly came on one play, but that's all you need as a wide receiver. He's a great wide receiver, right? All you need is one play. Okay, DJ Dallas now with Homer much healthier and Alex Collins from the practice squad. He's not going to be like a bell cow, and that turned out to be correct. It turns out he also got the short touchdown. So I mean, but he only saw I think like 36% of snaps. So that was correct analysis. That DJ Dallas was unlikely to be some type of bell cow for the Seahawks. And then with Ingram still out, we saw the game before that J.K. Dobbins got all that work, and maybe he's going to see an increased workload. No, turns out Gus Edwards J.K. Dobbins did exactly what he did. He just was efficient the last game and whatever, and that's what happened. So I listened to a whole bunch of stuff. Some of them were right. Some of them were wrong. If you were to list these out before Sunday slate, would you be able to tell which ones were going to be right and which ones are going to be wrong?
No, of course not.
Right. It could. All those other things could have happened the complete opposite way. So I just want to list those out based on this past slate as whenever you try to get and I don't take it away from the people that analyze the football games, the watch the tape people. Okay, so there's nothing against them. It's just that if there's 2 main skills in playing DFS, which should you spend more time on? How to exploit your opponents, how to properly lineup construct, or trying to predict the future and what's going on inside. Unless you're actually at close practice and see what plays they're running, because then that's a humongous edge. Because a lot of times in DFS, we're just trying to predict what the coaches are going to do. And we can't even assume that they're rational, right? Because they should be doing this, and they don't. So I take a look at these things and go, if you're going to go and sit and go, well, Blake, based on a 2-game sample size, based on a 5-game sample size, based on, this is why we excoriate BVP in MLB, right? Batter versus pitcher. It's like even in a 53 at-bat sample size, that's not, people like Cardi say BVP is real. It's just that in these small sample size, you wouldn't know which ones are real and which ones aren't. And that's the point that I'm bringing up with these examples of, like, you're going to study the tape and you're going to base your decisions on a very small sample size. Sometimes you'll be right. Sometimes you'll be wrong. But you have to hit 3 times. So 3 times meaning you have to get it right. Right? You have to get who's going to play Hilton snaps. Is it going to be Hilton? Is it going to be Johnson or Hall? Is it going to be Blake? Zacchaeus, Powell? Is it going to be that? Is it going to be that Lockett gets 20 targets in the slot and Metcalf sitting there with nothing? Right? Is that going to happen? The second thing is the player going to capitalize on that? Like Marcus Johnson, the analysis was right. Marcus Johnson ended up basically playing T.Y. Hilton's role. Still only scored 5 points, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't capitalize on it. Of course, seeing that happened, yes, Marcus Johnson at 3,000 was underpriced. So I think it's a correct decision. It didn't work out. So I don't want to use the results as, well, that was stupid to do. No, that one turned out to be right. And then the third thing is that now you got the analysis right. The player capitalized on the opportunity. Now they have to be in a lineup that you could win money on. Right? Yeah. It's just like you could be right, and like there are so many times in Discord where someone says, oh, look at my great call. And I said, how much money did you win? It said, oh, not much. So I said, so what does it matter? You made a great call. Great. Now you could brag to your friends. You could go on Twitter and beat your head and pat yourself on the back. But if it doesn't translate into money, to me, the game theory of DFS translates into money more often than me trying to predict what the teams are going to do. So this confirmation bias, this survivorship bias, right? People are like, oh, it's such an easy call playing Dalvin Cook against the Lions at 8,200. Or, it's such an easy call to play whatever it would be. That's like, well, now you're picking out the ones that you got right. How about the ones that you got wrong? like you don't hear about that. You only hear about the survivors. You don't hear about the bad ones. And then the call doesn't matter because you didn't great. So, I made the great call and I stacked the game and lost. Because it's like, okay, well, no, you needed that guy as a one-off, or that guy still, like Chase Edmonds, for instance, this past week, he ended up seeing 96% of snaps, right? I mean, if you made the call of well, they're not going to just play him in the Drake role, they're just going to make him a bell cow. You got it right, and he didn't capitalize on it. He had the lowest score you could possibly get of someone that had 28 touches in a game, but. If you played him in a lineup, I mean, the thing is that it could have easily been the other way. James Conner could have played 96% of snaps, right? It could have been. The game script could just flip on its head on one play, and everything goes out the window, right? The Ravens could have ran Dobbins more than Edwards. They could have not. If you look at the whole time you're prognosticating as a long term, you're most likely to get half right and half wrong. And when it comes to game theory, if you're down to a decision where half the time you get it right and half the time you get it wrong, you're essentially flipping a coin. So imagine if that's the case. Imagine me telling you if you're going to decide between multiple players to just flip. Don't even watch the games. Don't even don't even care about what the coaches are going to do. And flipping a coin is going to be just as successful. Then why are you spending that time doing it? Like that's the concept. It's not that it's not valuable or it is valuable or so you could get it right 52% of the time. So there's a little bit of edge. But I don't want to debate the semantics of it, but the general concept is that if you're spending time on something, this is the whole play whoever you want type of mentality. If you're spending a time on something that's a 51-49, maybe there's something that's a 70-30 that you should be spending more time on.
Exactly.
And that where you get more edge trying to decide between two players in a lineup that are projected nearly exactly the same, and then diving for an hour into PFF stats or something. There's probably a better use of your time if it's that close, because you're going to get it right as much as you're going to get it wrong, and then not succumbing to the confirmation bias afterwards, not succumbing to I should have seen this coming either way, and either victory lapping or kind of poo-pooing and saying it's bad luck or whatever. David Johnson getting injured is bad luck. Okay? Justin Jackson getting injured on the first play is bad luck. Like I can't fault my decisions there. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna spend 10 hours watching tape, and it turns out that if you were to back test it, because that's what no one does. No one back tests their takes. Who back tests their takes? Right? There's no take back taste. There isn't.
Yeah.
So, but if you did, you'd probably see it'll be not correlated that much, because half the time you get it right and half the time you get it wrong, and then it's quite likely 100% of the time you don't make money off of it anyway.
Exactly.
And because you're not building good lineups. So I mean, I'm assuming, Eric, you agreed with me to some point, but I don't want to come across as like, well, football knowledge is bullshit. But all I'm saying is that weigh the benefits versus the time and what you should be focused on. If you're already a great DFS player and you're like, I got my process down, I'm 5 years profitable, all that type of shit, and you're like, well, I'm going to see if there's a little bit more. If can I squeak out a 0.5% edge by something that no one's paying attention to? Okay, then go do it. But there's so many people that watch the All 22 and still don't know how to put together a good GPP lineup.
I think that's what the last part that you said was perfect, because the problem is, to me, that people they have it backwards, right? They start with I can pick out the best plays based on whatever, right? It could be watching the All 22, or I just know more about football. I watch all the games on Sunday. So they start with thinking that they can just pick players better than other people. And at the end of the day, that's the greatest player picker of all time based on watching the tape or whatever. Just like you said, okay, maybe it's 52%, maybe it's even 55 or 60%, but that's still hardly an edge. So people start there. I started there, 5-6 years ago or whatever. That's what I thought. I know football. I played football. Like I played football in college. I coached. I know the X's and O's. I watch all these games. I know this shit better than everybody. And then you lose a lot. You consistently lose because you're not better at picking, because the outcomes are so much more random than anyone will ever give them credit for. Even more random. I think you said it recently when we were talking. They're even more random than you and I will probably give them credit for. And we think that they're like infinitely more random than the average DFS player does. So people start in the wrong place originally, I think. Like I said, I did too. I think it's a lesson like probably most people just have to learn by going through it. So once you figure out that what is, like you said, the 80-20 rule, it's probably a lot more than 80-20, but let's just use the 80-20 rule. That if you spend 80% of your time focused on like the game theory of DFS, the fact that we're playing a game and how do you beat your opponents, how do you, exploit what your opponents are doing, which is what I basically then did for like multiple years. And I still haven't, I'm still not an expert. But I've got my head wrapped around, the concept of that we're playing a game against other people, and really, really focused the overwhelming majority of my time on that. I do then still think I use a little bit, like it's probably like 95-5, where it's more like this deciding factor. Like we were talking about in cash games, you should have, based on the other decisions that you made, which were all, it was in a cash team, so it's a little different, but they were all like game theory type decisions. You should have then chose Keenan Allen because of the other decisions that you made. In my opinion, the only like advantage you can get, and the where I use it, where I do like to like watch the games, is that last little 5%, like you said. I'm building, and some of my teams have zero to do with football takes. Some of them, there's maybe a little bit more than whatever. But it's only when you're trying to squeak out, like you said, that last little bit of potential advantage, and it has to align with the fact that you're playing a game. Like you said, the Tyler Lockett thing. If that's like, there's no advantage in playing a game against other people when everybody thinks like that's the football take, right? Like, and I'm like you said, I don't know if it was right or wrong. I played Tyler Lockett this week. I don't know if that's not the point. But the point is that when all of your opponents have the exact same football take, there's no advantage in using your football take to it. There's more advantage in using your I'm playing a DFS game. And I think people just, there is a certain balance, and that balance is way, way, way more to the I'm playing a game side of things, and all this shit is random than people will give it credit for. And so I think, like I said, I do use, and we've talked about it, I use a little bit, I care about football. Like it's just like a hobby of mine. I enjoy watching the game. So I use a little bit of that, that pulling levers. I use a tiny little bit of that football lever, but like 95% of what I'm doing is based on game theory. And it took me a long time to reach this point, because you're human, you make mistakes, you're stubborn, you think you know more than everybody else. But the overwhelming majority of people still think like, I don't know, it's 50-50, or, we're lucky, probably even like better casual players think it's like 50-50 picking players and game theory. When, like I said, it's probably like 95+% is we're playing this game. You have no real advantage. I'll use an example from this past week where I think people can think about this kind of thing, but it's because it relates to like roster construction and leverage and game theory. So one example you didn't bring up was the Dolphins situation. So I used this, and I used this because this was an example where I did think I had a take, or like a real football take, if you will, on what the Dolphins would do without all their running backs and having traded their slot receiver, Isaiah Ford. So everyone else was doing the Marcus Johnson thing, or there was tons of different, these unknown, Christian Blake, whatever. So I was playing Chase Edmonds. I played Chase Edmonds. And I had a relatively chalky lineup. So instead of doing something with like one of the popular punts, right, I wanted to then use a potential football take that I had, which was I thought Jakeem Grant would have a chance at an expanded role at 3K, and no one was playing him. He's 1% owned. So that was my like, okay, it's my last little, right? I've built my entire lineup. It's my last little tiny little bit. It correlates with it makes perfect sense from within the lineup that I'm playing. And it is kind of like a football take, but it's also just as much like a game theory, and I'm playing this game against opponent's take. So I think that's where that kind of thing is where people should take these things into consideration. Like, you can use these kinds of takes. I do, but it has to make sense, and it has to fit into the fact that we are playing this game against other people. You're not a scout. You're not projecting the outcomes of games. So once people can kind of wrap their heads around that, then I think you can start to understand how all this stuff plays together.
Right, and I tend to lean towards long-term, large sample size types of strategies. So when people give me shit for, well, I'm playing a lot of this guy, and they go, well, that guy sucks. It's like, well, if you look at a correlation graph compared to the past 10, 20 years of data, like I should be playing David Johnson, right? When a team is a touchdown favorite with a 29 implied total, and the projections, I mean, he was the best projected running back play based on that. And I'll let whether it happens on that slate or future, like it doesn't. That it's hard for people I know I put things sometimes in simpler terms because of Twitter and typing and whatever, but like I don't predict outcomes means that is that if I'm going to call a bet with a flush to come and I'm getting a positive EV bet, if I'm getting 8-1 odds, like as long as I'm continually able to get those odds on that flush, it doesn't matter to me whether or not the flush comes out like right now. Am I going to get in those situations again and again? Yes, I'm going to hundreds and thousands of times. So just instead of thinking in terms of, well, it's a Tuesday and it's cloudy, and on 3 Tuesdays it's been cloudy, the flush doesn't come in, right? So I should fold here. But it sounds ridiculous, but that's what people sound like. That's what I hear when people go in the 3 games that so and so hasn't played. You're talking about 3 games. It's a sample size of 3 games without context. Now, as the sample size increases, your confidence level could go up. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
3 games is still better than no games. You're right. And 8 games is better than 3 games. But even in NFL, sample sizes are small as it is. Where if you say in the 30 games, it's still kind of suspect to some extent. But I could take a look at the past 40 years of NFL. And obviously the game has changed over time. So you can't necessarily just go completely by this. But running backs, touches, and implied team total and spread is high correlation, right? I mean, it makes sense for the game script, right? I mean, it just makes complete sense. And quarterback fantasy scoring is tied more to efficiency than to volume, right? We've learned like that when people are like, oh, I'm going to take the garbage quarterback that's going to throw up 50 passes. Like a lot of times, he throws up 50 passes and still gets no touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So you're sitting there with 8 fantasy points that you'd rather take the guy that's only throwing 32 times. I mean, Russell Wilson's a perfect example of that he puts up scores even without passing 40 times. Running backs.
Jared Goff threw 60 something times 2 weeks ago and scored like 70 or 17, DraftKings points. It's definitely a misnomer that I hear that all the time. And honestly, I used to kind of think the same thing too. You know what I mean? Like that's a point actually that I don't think people talk about enough. Oh, well, like because when it works,
right?
It works so well. You get Drew Lock, right? Drew Lock has like 3 DraftKings points at halftime or whatever, and then he just goes absolutely nuclear in garbage time, and people are, oh my god, I got to get this garbage time guy. Look at all these points he accumulates. But it's
survivorship
so
bias.
Like
I mean, you're mentioning exactly what I'm talking about. You're remembering the time it works, and you're discarding all the times that it didn't work, especially when you have chatter. When you hear it over and over again, which is a bias also. So you hear it amongst I played Drew Lock because I thought the Broncos could win that game. So I'm not playing Drew Lock for garbage time. I'm playing Drew Lock because he projects well against the Falcons defense, and I'm expecting in a dome with a lot of plays in that game that he has a shot at a ceiling with cheaper receivers. But I didn't say I'm going to play Jake Luton for that reason. No, I expected the Jaguars to lose. I'm not playing Gilbert for that reason. No, just Lock projected well in that spot to be efficient, not to chuck up a ton. But the whole point of cherry picking, like when these things happen, I'm going for the long term. Like I played David Montgomery in cash games. I played the cheap build of David Johnson, David Montgomery, and Justin Jackson. You could see why I had a really bad. But people are cherry picking Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, who only got 70% of snaps. So he got 10 targets. Yeah, I mean he did Christian. He has a ceiling. I get it. But I mean, if you told me beforehand he was only going to see 70%, like he's priced for 90%. That's what we're used to seeing him at. But in general, these long sample size types of things, I think, especially at certain positions, I think a lot of people have not adjusted their expectation on lineup construction based on new information, based on the fact that we're getting 11 game slates where half the games have a 50 plus total, right? Half these games, 50 plus total, teams are passing more. Teams are using multiple running backs, even in situations where they have a good running. I mean, like even Derrick Henry is getting spelled for Dante Freeman or something for 4 plays or something. But those 4 plays affect the person's ceiling. I mean, we see Benny Snell coming in for James Conner. In some games they don't. Some games they do. Right? We see, what tilt the work is going to be, but we also see at the goal line that sometimes it's a hot hand. Sometimes Zach Moss gets stuffed. Sometimes he gets 2 touchdowns, right? Sometimes they're going down the field and it's a 2-minute drill and Devontae Booker gets the touchdown and not Josh Jacobs because Booker just happened to be on the field for the next play.
Yep.
So the variance in running backs, we were more accustomed in fantasy football in general, not just DFS, to think of wide receivers as the volatile players. But to me, the running backs are the volatile players because you can't guarantee that they're even going to, I mean, we see these snap counts and it's very hard to pick out a guy that's going to see 70+% of snaps even, and let alone the goal line work. I mean, we could say, obviously it's going to be Josh Jacobs on the goal line. Well, who says it is? I mean, who and they get the other. We had Nyheim Hines running the ball on the goal line.
Oh God, yeah.
Right, and he's considered the pass catching back in games. So I look at the running back position as, and this is the reason why David Montgomery is like leads is 6th in rushing, in carries, and like 7th in targets of all run. Like, and without Cohen there, he's seeing like 85% of snaps. I know David Montgomery sucks, but like as far as opportunity, if we take a look at I know now I'm cherry picking this last week, but I think that this last week shows the concept very well that I could go down, like I'm in results DB, and I'm going to go to the running back position. Okay, let's take out the ceiling guys that hit their ceilings, which is basically 2, Cook and McCaffrey. Both were over 8,000, so you paid for those ceilings.
Yeah.
Outside of those, I'm going to go to the running back position and sort by fantasy points. So looking at the running backs, other than them on this slate, that were at least like owned to some extent. Obviously, J.D. McKissick had a 17-point game. Duke Johnson obviously coming in for David Johnson at a 16-point game. But then we had James Robinson, 15.9. Wayne Gallman, 14.7. Josh Jacobs, 13.8. Todd Gurley, 13.5. Antonio Gibson, 13.5. Zach Moss, 12.8. DeAndre Swift, 12.7. CEH, 12.4. DJ Dallas, 11.9. Chase Edmonds, 11.8. Travis Homer, 11. Joshua Kelly, 10.9. Jonathan Taylor, 10.4. Gus Edwards, 10.4. Ezekiel Elliott, 8.9. Jordan Howard, 7.9. Adrian Peterson, 7.3. Derrick Henry, 6.8. Devin Singletary, 6.4. David Montgomery, 6.2. J.K. Dobbins, 5.5. James Conner, 4. Melvin Gordon, 3.7. What's the difference between the guys that had like double digits, like 12, and the guys that had 5? A touchdown. That's the only difference between those players. And then what's the difference between the ceiling players and everything else? Just humongous games. Just, the multiple touchdown, big play breaking games. If Cook and McCaffrey didn't have those, they wouldn't put up those scores. But those are ceilings. So I'm not arguing about ceilings. But from a median perspective, what the fuck is the difference between any of these running backs? That if you need to rely on a touchdown in order to make value, obviously you probably want to side with the teams that are favored, that the guy gets more likely to get more goal line work. But still, for the price, I mean, what does DeAndre Swift? He gets less of the work, but he gets more of the quality work.
Valuable.
Right, more valuable touches. David Montgomery gets a lot of the touches, but doesn't do much with them. So, like, You get Chase Edmonds got a ton of the touches and did nothing with them. Zach Moss gets quality touches, but gets very few of them. But once you look at like the pros and cons of each, like, oh, Josh Jacobs gets the goal line carries and most of the work, but he could get vultured. So he got vultured. Wayne Gallman, what was wrong with Wayne Gallman on the Giants? Nothing. What made him any different from Justin Jackson? Nothing. I mean, like, what? I mean, I just take a look at all of these and go, like, not that running backs don't matter, but like, I think past 6,000 in salary, like, what other than ceiling, what do any of these matter other than probably you should side with the running backs that are on favored teams? I mean, like, that's long sample, big sample size type of stuff. So, like, playing David Johnson, playing, David Montgomery, even without a touchdown, could have, 24 touches and give me 12 points. Like, well, he's only getting 12 points. It's like, well, fucking what are all the other running backs doing? I mean, like it's so great. You played James Robinson and got 15 for 7,000, and I got 12 for 5,700. I mean, but when you take a look at wide receiver, okay? I'm going to list down the top scoring wide receivers that got at least like 3% ownership. So not like, I'm not Curtis Samuel's ceiling game. I'm not including. Tyreek Hill, DJ Chark, Jerry Jeudy, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Christian Kirk, Will Fuller, Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. Then we have John Brown, Brandon Cooks, like Julio Jones. Am I naming people that like, oh, I couldn't believe, like we have a couple. Yeah, Zacchaeus is in there and David Moore with 17 points, like stuff like that. But am I listing receivers that aren't like wide receiver ones on their teams? And
it's a bunch of alphas that you expect to be able to put up points because they're leading their offenses. Yeah.
Right. And they're getting PPR points on a site like DraftKings. I'm not looking at lower guy. I mean, like Michael Pittman put up 9.6 points. I mean, but who's rostering Michael Pittman? Isaiah McKenzie got a touchdown. So what does that matter? But like, do I play iffy wide receivers? Like I'm looking at it like, why aren't I in cash games? Why aren't I not just playing a wide receiver in the flex spot? Like if like we're not living in the time of Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson and Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey and stuff. Even Dalvin Cook. Sometimes Madison comes in and plays 40% of the snaps. So we can't even
look. Dalvin
right?
played 66% of the snaps this week. I know there was a few snaps at the end, that Madison got, but even this week, right? He scored 40, 50 something DraftKings points. He still didn't even play 70% of the snaps. So like, yes, he broke the long runs or whatever, but it's just a perfect example of like, there's so much more volatility to all these guys. Like Terry McLaurin, he does not leave the field. He's
right. Most of the wide receivers that I listed are guys that are playing 95% of the snaps. Like if you gave me a choice this coming week of playing a guy in the flex versus like should I play an $8,500 running back or Devontae Adams? Like give me Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Like just give me Michael Thomas. Give me Keenan Allen. Give me but most of these guys are priced in the 7K, in the Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, the high end James Conner, James Robinson. Like, dude, I'll play these I'll play Keenan Allen over any 7K running back because Keenan Allen doesn't even need a touchdown to get to 15 points. Most of these running backs, they need a touchdown to get to 15 points or a huge PPR day. Like guys like Alvin Kamara, but they're priced that way. Like Alvin Kamara is priced at 8+K. Like there are more paths to me that Keenan Allen and Julio Jones, obviously without Ridley, or one of the Seattle wide receivers, or one of like any of those guys, or even going into the mid range. I mean, Brandon Cooks is sitting there at under 6K, getting an average of 10 targets a game. Like you give me 10 targets, 7 catches, and 60 yards without a touchdown. I feel like that result, 7 for 60 for Brandon Cooks, I feel much more confident than rostering a 6K running back. Like I just feel
agree.
like like 13 points. Cooks easily gets 13. Sterling Shepard for 5,000 or something. Like give me double digit. Can I get double digits? And I feel like a lot of these running backs, obviously the floors of like when you play a McCaffrey or a Cook or a Kamara, they're going to be, I mean, their floors are high, but their floors are like 20 and you're paying for it. And the ceiling comes with the touchdowns. I have nothing against those guys. It's more of the middle range type of stuff where, well, my flex has to be a third running back, and I could punt at play a $3,200 wide receiver that has a good chance at a 0, rather than fill my wide receiver slots with 15 plus points, like 75+% outcomes, and they all have ceilings. Like people look at Tyreek Hill and go, well, how do you play him in cash games? Well, I feel more confident that Tyreek Hill is going to do well on the Chiefs than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? If they're both the same price, like Eric, if they were both the same price, CEH, and I told you that CEH was going to get 70% of the snaps, and they're both 6,500. I still think I take Tyreek Hill over him. I mean, like
I also would, yeah.
Right, but I'm not even talking about from a ceiling. Like if you're playing GPPs, I'm talking about just from a median perspective of like I think Tyreek Hill has the narrower range of outcomes in today's football. I think like if you're gonna take a shot on someone, in similar to a running back, like I take a look at David Montgomery, and I'm like, okay, he gets the volume or whatever like that, but couldn't I just play DJ Chark? Like, I mean, like I'm saying, like DJ Chark, like what's his floor? Maybe it's 6, but I mean his ceiling is 40. David Montgomery's ceiling may be 20. I mean, like I think he gets to 10 or 12 more often than other people in that range, but he doesn't hit 20 plus often enough. I could get bailed out by Chark. I could get bailed out playing Judy in the flat. I'm not even talking about the wide receiver. Right, you get that, Eric. I'm talking about this is in my flex spot in a cash game where I'm looking, going, why aren't I playing John Brown? Why aren't I playing Brandon Cooks? Why aren't I playing why aren't I, instead of a 7K running back? Why aren't I playing Allen Robinson? Like why? I'm looking at these scores and going like Marvin Jones, who I think only had 4 catches, outscored like 90% of the running backs this past slate on like limited targets. Danny Amendola outscored most of the running backs. I mean, Devontae Parker at 5,200 outscored most of the running backs. Sterling Shepard outscored most. Zach Pascal had 10.5 points. Okay, so I know I'm a little bit of cherry picking this past slate because obviously they on other slates there would be more, but it's week 10 coming up. Since week 1, I know we forget about week 1. We forget about week 2. We forget about what seemed like it was ages ago. Well, remember the slate where Miles Sanders busted and like we've seen so many. Kareem Hunt, 9.8 points. We've seen last year also. I mean, this extends to last year as well. That chalk running backs. And when I mean chalk, it just means that they project slightly higher than other running backs, and then everyone kind of jumps on board because they are the best projected play. That because of confirmation bias, we look at the times where the ones that succeeded, but don't remember that I think they've busted. I think compared to the chalk wide receivers, the chalk running backs over the past 2 years have busted more than the wide receivers. Yet you go into cash games and you see running back flex. You go into GPPs and you see 60, 70% running back flex. Yeah, that's correct when we have Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson from 2016. Yeah, okay, I get that. When you have running backs that you're like, okay, all I have to do is jam in Zeke and David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell and then find 3-4K wide receivers that get a shot and my 30 plus points from each of my running back spots, I can win a GPP. Now I view it the complete opposite. I view it that can I get Keenan Allen, Julio Jones, and Devontae Adams into my lineup, and then hopefully hopefully someone's going to fall in the end zone, right? It's like hopefully Zach Moss at 4,200 falls in the end zone, or like stuff like that. And I think a lot of sharper players, at least in GPP, have realized that. Like I look at sharper players lineups, and they have a lot more wide receiver flex. It's also a dynamic of stacking. I get it, because if you're stacking, you're filling up wide receiver slots more often than the running back slots, so you need a flex spot. But like, I think that the days of like automatically assuming that as a median cash build, small field single entry build, that jamming in 3 running backs, because I hear that running back high opportunity cost. Like, no, actually, I think wide receiver is the high opportunity cost. And to me, the lowest opportunity cost is defense, right? Because that's so variant. Then it's tight end, because there's just so many bad like, you could survive 8 points at tight end and win. Then quarterback, although that's come up this past 2 years. Quarterback used to be you pay down because the range of outcomes is kind of narrow at quarterback. Now we're seeing much passing heavy games, rushing quarterbacks, that's kind of moving away. And then we see running backs where hot hands and touchdown variance. To me, the safest position is wide receiver now, which
I agree.
Compared to the common assumption over the past 10 years of fantasy football, like, that makes it, to me, it makes logical sense the way the games are now. But I think many people have not adjusted, or just refuse to believe it.
100%. I think, well, there's a lot to unpack of this subject, but I'm happy that you brought it up, because it was something I mean, even like to start the year, it wasn't something I was really considering. I've always played, basically, stack up a game and play my 3 high floor running backs, right? Like, just like everybody did. But then, like, as this year started going, everything that you just illustrated was something I started to kind of pick up on. Like, especially once, like, we lost CMC and Saquon and stuff. It really started to ring true. But we have to adapt to the situation that we're given now. And I think it just kind of started to see this same trend that you just outlined in running backs, that I don't think the field is at all thinking about. So I wrote about it, I don't know, maybe week 4 or something like that, where once we got all these injuries, I'm like, everybody is going to keep spending at running back. And we have these just absolute alpha, like, basically lock wide, so Julio wasn't even good this week. He scored 16 points. Stephon Diggs didn't score a touchdown. He scored like 25 points. Tyler Lockett sucked, right? It was horrible. But he still scored like 8 points. Like, that's not good, but it's like, if you said Kareem Hunt was busting and scoring 9 points. So anyway, I believe everything that you just said with the state of the NFL and the ecosystem that we are playing within now. People are not adjusting because we're seeing every week there's some abnormality, some crazy ceiling game from somebody that people can't get out of it. Dalvin Cook scores 50 every week, right? Or Derrick Henry breaks the slate and scores 50, or whatever. There's always someone. Aaron Jones does it. Someone on the higher end has had a game through basically every week so far this year that I just don't think is reality. When the rest of the slate, right, where you get like that one slate breaker, and then you get all these guys under 20 points. We had the 1 week a few weeks ago where fucking everybody scored 20 points, but that also makes the exact point that you could just get 20 points. You could get the same points from everybody. So it's been clouded by this one, guy just hitting a ceiling in that week. And so some people have made the argument to me that, like, okay, well, that's why I need to play Dalvin and CMC. Because
I'm going to interrupt. It's like, I maybe I know what you're going to say is that, well, you need it, but it's the same concept that I said before about, like, I listed off all the takes. Like, do you know which one it's going to be? Like, it could be it didn't end up being Kareem Hunt. It ended up being Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was the chalk and he hit a ceiling. And then the week before, Kareem Hunt was the chalk and died. Like people have this confirmation bias of, well, that means I need to. Well, like, who says it wasn't going to be Derrick Henry this week and Dalvin Cook ends up with 14 points? You're going to cherry pick based on like one of these. I'm going to highlight what I said earlier is if your track record is 50% and you don't know which one, yes, you're right. Most likely on an 11-game slate, there's going to be one running back, most likely, that's going to put up a score that you need. That the GPP winning lineup will likely have this running back in it, as long as they're owned enough. If it's a point, it's a Duke Johnson. If he put up a ton when David Johnson got injured, probably may not matter because he's barely owned. But anything that 2% or higher or something. If Wayne Gallman at 0.97% put up a 30-point game and he was the highest scoring running back on the slate, he's probably going to show up in a large field GPP winning lineup. It just, which one is it going to be? You could say, well, look at this week and look at that week and look at this. Well, you tell me which one. You can't tell me it was going to be Cook this week or Henry. You couldn't. Well, against the Detroit run defense. Well, how about Kareem Hunt against that bad defense? How about all the other times that you say the bad defense in 5-game sample sizes? Like it's a confirmation bias of seeing it after it happens, and then we see it in baseball, right? In MLB, that the larger the slate. And this is the concept of stacking in MLB. Like, if you have a 14-game slate in MLB, the likelihood of one team putting up out of 28, putting up 10-plus runs is quite high because there's 28 teams to do it. On a 4-game slate where there's only 8 teams, there's less likelihood of that happening only because of there's being less teams. So on a large slate, you always stack 5 guys because, like, every team, no matter how crappy, is going to be owned to some extent in a 5-man stack. Even the Marlins, even the crappy Orioles or something. So if whatever team scores 10 plus, 12 plus usually, that's the winning 5-game stack in a large field GPP. The thing is that what's going to happen today? Like, I don't know. Yes, it's more likely that the Dodgers do it, but they're also twice as expensive, right? It's always factored into their price. But the thing is, on one single day of MLB baseball, who the fuck knows? But in MLB, we never have these conversations, right, Eric? We never have we should have seen that coming because we've seen ace pitchers get blown up. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't stack against them, but they when they have a bad game. Garrett Cole, 3 home runs gets hit off of him, and he still puts up 18 points, but it's not good for his salary. Or we see teams like, out of the blue, the Pirates, beat up on Brandon Woodruff in the Brewers, and they have 12 runs. Like, we just accept that variance in MLB DFS, right? We're just like, who could have saw that coming? And but not to the extent in which, like, how many times are the Red Sox chalk and bust? Like, no one, like it's just like, okay, here we go again. JD Martinez 0 for 4 and as 28% owned, and like, we realize this. Like, we realize what we're doing is, like, over a long-term thing of, like, yeah, I'm going to play JD Martinez at 4,200 against the lefty at Fenway Park that's throwing garbage. And he could go 0 for 4. And, okay, I get it. But tell me, they're going to be 50 times in the season that we're going to get someone like that. And most of the time it doesn't work. But in football, it seems, because of the really small sample sizes, we get the cherry picking of well, no, you're wrong. You're wrong, Jordan. I could predict this. And I'm like, then how come you haven't made $1 million in DFS? Like, if you could, why aren't you just betting on the fucking props in the games? Like, if you could. Yeah. Like, it's so much easier than building a lineup to beat other people. So that's why I look at all of this going, I don't care what what the preconceived notion is. I don't care what happened in 2016 on how we play DFS or how we build fantasy football lineups. I don't care that in the past 3 games this guy was out, this guy went nuts. It's still 3 games. I still need to compare that to the ownership, because if if the ownership comes with it, like it's the numerical way of what you said earlier. Like, what I'm doing is comparing ceiling probability to ownership, right? Looking at a projection model. I'm not watching the all 22. I barely know what most of these guys look like, okay? So, but you said before about if you have a take that everyone else has, like, what advantage do you have? Oh, you correctly identified that it's more likely that Tyler Lockett's going to see more targets because Tre'Davious White, and you're going through all the charts and everything. It's like, yeah, well, he's going to be fucking 28%. Like other people have identified that also. You're not gaining anything by it. You'd be more likely to say, well, the probability that I'm wrong, right? It's almost like make the correct take that probably is more likely to be right. But is it more likely compared to the ownership? And then you look and you go, well, I believe Tyler Lockett will get more targets and better results this game 70% of the time. And then 30% of the time I'm wrong. And if you're 70-30 on these types of takes, you're a fucking genius. Okay? Because, right, 70 to be 70% of the time on who exactly is going to see Calvin Ridley's targets, like you'd be printing, okay, at that rate. So if you happen to be at that rate, 30% of the time you're going to be wrong. So I take a look at DK Metcalf at 5% owned, or whatever the fuck he was, right? He was low. It was fucking 4% owned across the single entry stuff. And Lockett, like, I'm going to look the difference between Lockett in the in the SPY, the 100K to first single entry. Lockett was 33.9% owned. And Metcalf, I have to start scrolling, was 4.97% owned. So even if you say to yourself, I'm going to be right 70% of the time, your answer should be to roster DK Metcalf.
Right.
Which makes no, you have to have this cognitive dissonance of you could be right more often, yet still take the other player because you're still not right often enough that it's actually plus EV to take the shot at maybe I'm, like, to think in terms. You know how crazy this sounds, Eric, to most people? Of going, I'm going to predict what happens in an NFL game and then go, well, I'm going to take the player just in case I'm wrong, because just in case I'm wrong actually stands to profit more than me being right, because so many others are also, they're having their own, they're doing the same take as everyone. And like, who backtests the take? No one backtests their takes. So they just
favorite, it's my favorite. It's my favorite, like, saying or whatever, you know. It's not about, and it, like, it's so simple. I think it was, I can't remember who said it. Anyway, one of the you know, awesome DFS guys out there, OGs. But it's not about, you know, being right the most. It's about profiting the most when you're right. Right. And that's
perfect. It's not about being right. It's about about how much money do I make when I am right, and to explain to people. Like, because I'll get trolled now that obviously I'm getting more Twitter followers now. So I did, and then obviously on my YouTube streams you get the new people. They're like, should I play this guy or that guy? And then I say, well, I'm playing this guy. So you could do whatever you want. I don't know what lineups you're building, and then they'll come after me and say, oh, great. Sometimes I get tilted when it's a good call. When they say, well, a good call on that guy, it's like I didn't call. I literally don't call anything. So there's nothing for me to call. So whether or not it works out is not. It's like good call on whether or not the flush is going to come out. A good call on heads on a coin flip. Like, what the fuck? There's no call involved. But just the fact of, like, in GPPs, you are going to be wrong 90% of the time. Like, that's built in. If you're not wrong 90% of the time, then you're not playing GPPs well. That's why you haven't won one, because you've been right too much, right? It's kind of weird to say you haven't won, especially a large field GPP, because you've been right too much, because you've been right and you're doing the very similar that other people. You're not the only one looking at this, right? So you're doing the same shit. I'm playing stuff I'm going to play 17 weeks out of the season. I don't view Week 10 slate as Week 10 slate. I view the season. I'm going to play at NFL DFS for 5 years. I'm going to play 85 classic slates, and I would like to get a 10 to 30% ROI over 5 years. Like, can I do that? Right. Can I do 10 to 30% ROI over 5? If I could get a 30% ROI over 5 years, like, there's no investment in the world that could fucking give me that. right? Over that course of time, unless it's extremely risky type of shit. So like that's how I look at things. So like the slate coming up, I'm looking if I played this out a million times, what shows me the most money, and can I do that on week 11, and can I do that on week 12, and can I do that on and just keep on doing that. David Montgomery's is now down to 5,000. I'm jamming him into 40% of my lineups. And it's going to be one of these weeks where it's a bad matchup and he breaks off his one run of the entire fucking year and he's 4% owned because people are like, the guy sucks. And for a 5K running back, he's in the winning GPP. Like, but I'm basing it on the fact that he gets 85% of the snaps. And like, I'm basing it on until Tariq Cohen comes back, until you show me that he's not going to be on the field like every play. Like I'm just gonna keep on playing him as the price drops. Lamar Jackson this past week, I played a ton of him. He's gonna be under 7,000, and we know he has a ceiling. Like yes, he's not played well this season, right? His prior is starting to dip down.
Right.
But if I see he's gonna be 4% owned, like in a dome against, I mean I'll take the shot. Kyler Murray, I did that also, 41 points. But I'm not cherry pick. See, if I say that's what I took Kyler Murray, 41 points. Hey, yeah, but I also took Lamar Jackson and he sucked. So like I was right on one and I was wrong on the other. But if I continue to do this, even though I'll be wrong 90% of the time, I'll make more money than you. So like my response to a lot of people that football take people are like let's look at the scoreboard at the end of the season. Like my goal is not to be right. My goal is to make money. Like it sounds like you're doing the same thing, but you're not. Like you're like Eric, when you play GPPs in single entry, like you're not trying to be right. Jakeem Grant, I played Jakeem Grant, right? I played him in Cardinals stacks. Murray, Hopkins, Kirk, Grant, those types of shits, right? As well as Edmonds, Edmonds Parker, Edmonds Grant, the secondary correlations. I did that also because what's the difference between Jakeem Grant and Marcus Johnson? Like, who knows? And with Isaiah Ford guard, like you said, it's possible. That's all I had to say in my mind. How confident is the field in Marcus Johnson? How confident is the field in Christian Blake? Is that that should be the same confidence as people should have in Jakeem Grant playing the slot for the Dolphins? Yet Marcus Johnson's going to be 10% owned. And Christian Blake's going to be 3% owned, and Jakeem Grant's going to be 1% owned. So it's like most likely we're all wrong. Most likely all of these are wrong. But I'll play if they have an equal likelihood of being wrong. I'll play the lower owned one.
And that correlates with my team. It's a perfect example of all this. And then I just think spinning it back real quick to the running back thing. I think this mindset is something that people used to, it is flipped. I think it is totally flipped on its head. People used to somewhat understand this, right? What people will still tell you, what, touts will still tell you is wide receiver is super volatile. Running back is, steady. So, play the chalky running backs and spend your money at running back because you're getting what, this floor from those guys. And wide receiver, it's like, oh, there's some cheap guy that's going to get 6 targets at wide receiver, right? Marcus Johnson, whatever. When in reality, what I think smart people started to see earlier in the year and what you described and what I believe, passionately agree is the case now, is that has completely flipped on its head for everything that you outlined. The way teams are utilizing running backs, some of the injuries that we've had, the way passing is happening now in the NFL, a bunch of different factors have kind of flipped this game on its head. And if you're going to fall behind and continue to strap yourself to like the confirmation bias or survivorship bias that like we've seen, but look, Dalvin dropped a 50 spot, Derrick Henry had that big game, whatever. That is like so far from the point. When I think if we continue to play this season out, you're going to see, like you said, Julio without Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, the list goes on and on and on of all these wide receivers. And we have also seen that people forget when Tyler Lockett drops 50, when DK Metcalf drops 50, when Devontae Adams drops 50, whatever, when all these guys have their big games, people like write that off, and they're just like, oh yeah, but I still have to play Derrick Henry next week, because he's in a great matchup and he's going to get 25 carries or whatever. People just are still so stuck in this mindset of running backs, that they have to play, or that it's it's better to play the chalk running backs because that's how it always used to be, when that data is completely irrelevant to the game that we are playing right now. It's like we were playing Monopoly then and we're playing Chutes and Ladders now. Like that shit, it doesn't matter. Le'Veon Bell doesn't exist. Well, he exists, but in a very different form than he used to exist. Those types of plays and the ways the salary is put together. We're going to have it this week, and we had it like with Jamal Williams a couple of weeks ago. The min price running back stepping into like a workhorse role. But in general, that also does not exist anymore. And it used to be 3K, right? We used to get Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. Mike Davis is 3,000. It's like, there's no fucking way Mike Davis fails at 3,000, right? Like that's absurd. Or Jamal Williams is 3,000. But now they've also elevated the running back floor, and they're typically pricing up these backups, right? So J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram gets hurt. J.K. Dobbins is 4,900, 5K. It's a very different situation than if he's 3K. That's a big difference. So like all this is to say, this game has been flipped on its head, and people are not adjusting to the new game that we are playing now. And they're also like tying themselves to these random, like you said, cherry picking certain events. And it's typically with these workhorse backs. We've always gotten the Dalvin or Henry or whatever, like ceiling game pretty much every week this year. Kamara, we've gotten those guys to hit that ceiling, but it's going to happen probably several times. The probability hasn't played out yet where it could have been David Johnson had his ceiling. What if David Johnson scores 35? What if David Johnson has 100 rushing yards and two touchdowns? Well, you need him. You don't need Christian McCaffrey. You don't need to pay $9K for 35 when you get the ceiling game. We just haven't had it yet. It hasn't happened, and it also hasn't happened where the 5K guys kind of hit their 75th percentile, and the ceiling guys just have the Dalvin Cooks just have a median, right? Dalvin
Cooks we had 18. That. Didn't we have that? We had that week where everyone scored as long as you got 20 points out of your running backs. Like
right.
It didn't matter what you could have paid 7,000, 5,000. There was like 8 running backs that all had around 20 points, and as long as you had Bernard, like that was the Bernard Williams week, and with the minimum price, that type of stuff. But we've seen that in the past. I mean, we've literally seen it this year. That we've had weeks where there was no running back. We had a Derrick Henry big week. We had because obviously I won 50,000, so I know that. We had Mixon. When I came close, I came close on that Mixon week because I had a ton of him. But on all the other weeks, there was no if there was an outlier running back, it was like a 1% owned guy that just like. I remember like didn't James Robinson put up like a 35-point game at like no ownership?
Yeah, right.
Right, at all, like 2%, 1% or something like that. But most of the time, even this year, but you could go back to last year. I'm not just talking about this year. I'm talking about 2019 as well. Go back to 2019 and go back to some of 2018, and you'll find that the running back median compared to wide receiver median is higher, is more volatile. As a position, it isn't. See that? I think that the difference that we're trying to say here is that at wide receiver in general. So if we take the entire wide receiver pool, which includes the third wide receivers, includes everyone, that the position is more volatile, meaning that like. Guys' points could score 6, could score 20, whatever. But if you look at the high end, if you had to choose 10 wide receivers to put up over their median, so that whatever their median is based on projections, who would hit their median, you'd be able to identify those 10 people. Like you could essentially, I'm going to pick 10 people and I'm going to be right at like 7 out of 10 of them. I'm going to be right on. 8 out of 10, I'm going to be right on. And then running back, if you extrapolate over the past 2.5 years, you see that it's closer. That actually it's higher R squared. It's coming closer to the line. Yeah. But to pick out the ceiling guys, Jesus Christ, is it tough? Like you go from week to week, and it's like, yes, the overall running back outcomes were narrower, but the outlier, that whoever was past there could have been fucking. And I mean, you just go back 2.5 years, you'll see random games from random people as well as random bad games from good people that on a week to week basis. Are you going to be able to pick that out on a wide receiver? I am. Like wide receiver, I could just look and go, can I play Allen? Can I play maybe not Thielen anymore, but I mean you could. Brandon Cooks and Stephon Diggs and Kenny Golladay, I guess, to some extent. And like any of the guys in those ranges, the wide receiver ones, the alphas, I guess you want to call it. Like I'm going to get double digits. I'm more likely than not going to get double digits from them. And the running back position, I know I'm going to be able to get 20 points from a running back. Now, what the fuck tell me to pick the 10 running backs that are going to score the most points tell me. I could pick. Sometimes I'll be right, and a lot of times I'll be wrong. Like Connor said, 4 points, and they were the biggest favorite on the slate, and that type of stuff happens. You'll hear on review shows people talk about it. Dalvin Cook was such a lock, but if you listen to last week, you heard James Conner being touted. You hear other people, and no one will ever mention that. No one will just like James Conner. It very similar to Jonathan Bales. He tweeted out about good ideas stand the test of time, and bad ideas get weeded out more in the DFS and gambling space. And the reason we can make money in DFS is because bad ideas win just enough of the time that people think they're good ideas.
Yep.
Longer. So if people are going to point out Dalvin Cook and not point out James Conner, like that is quintessential confirmation bias. So if you had takes last week, like go back test your takes. No one does that. No one back tests their takes. And if you find that you're as right as often as you are wrong, then what's the fucking point? If you're not going to be able to know, it's BVP is real. Like even Cardi will say, like batter versus pitcher probably is real. The problem is in small sample sizes, you can't tell which batter it's real for and which pitcher it's real. You can't tell. That's the concept. It's not. I'm not saying that studying defensive coverages isn't real, right? Studying who's going to wide receiver cornerback matchups, they're probably real. Those types of things are probably real. But you're just not going to know who is it real for in one game. You're never going to be able to predict it well enough that you're not just basically flipping a coin. Yep. So that's the if we had Seahawks Bills games, if we had and the same cornerback, the same secondaries and the same receivers, and they played 50 games, like the Bills and Seahawks played 50 games against each other. And then you could say, okay, I should play Lockett because in these 50 games, like that's a big enough sample size. But you don't get that in NFL. You get that in NBA to some extent. You get that in MLB to some extent, but not just for batter versus pitcher. Like we know that Mike Trout is a better player than whoever. I'm just Jason Kipnis or something. Like we know that. We have thousands of at bats to know that. Pitchers, right? The pitchers get 100 pitches in a game, right? And then they'll get 30 starts a year, and they'll play for multiple years. So we get those stats that we could say, but in NFL, we don't. So, like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get pushed back on this or not, but to me, this is the biggest struggle when I try to help DFS players, like try to break out of their mindset that it's not about football. Because sometimes you have to go to an extreme just to make the point across. That I'm like, I'm not saying these things aren't valuable. I'm just saying that one, they're not as valuable as the strategy. And two, they are valuable and you're not going to be, the more important point is that you're not going to be able to know when they are and when they're not for specific instances, because saying in the past 3 games they've done this. Well, Cam Newton barely rushed the ball. right? The Patriots and less like
Yeah.
they usually run a Patriots run like RPO and Newton's, nope. Newton was basically a pocket passer. Other
Yep.
than obviously he scored the goal line carries. But if you would have told me in the past game that against the Jets, a 10-point favorite, Newton's going to have 50 rushing yards easy because they're going to rush or whatever like that, and James White out of the backfield. Nope, you were wrong. Like, you could have still gotten there regardless. I mean, whatever. But Jacoby Myers has a huge game, catching 160 yards passing. But like just backtest your takes. If you happen to be someone that it could go 70% on your takes over the course of multiple seasons, then fucking you should be betting on foot. You shouldn't even be telling me, right? You should be silently withdrawing money from your DraftKings account, sportsbook account, as well as your DFS account. That's all I'm saying. Like that. So, yes, Eric, you know more about football than I do, but do you think that gives you any really advantage?
No.
Over Awesemo? Over
God, no.
Well, maybe in the Thunderdome. I think Awesemo's. I looked at some.
I feel
Awesemo's
confident
lineups.
I could take him in the Thunderdome now. After we have a 10 game sample now that he sucks in the Thunderdome. So now I'm.
It's not the results. It's the lineups. I can't. I paid Empire Maker. I said okay. A 30-person. He's playing 20 and he's playing 20 to 30 man contests, and he's running out lineups that are you would barely run in the SPY. I'm just saying, you would in a 5,000 person contest. It's I understand that lineup, but in a 30-person contest, I'm like what? Why are you playing a Bridgewater stack? Why are you trying to play a 3+1 in a 30 man? I can understand stacking a game. You want to play a 3+3? You want to just say, fuck it, I'm just going to take a game?
Yeah.
Okay, I can understand that. But, Edelman one-offs? I mean, what the fuck was that? Right? I'm looking at this going, he doesn't even project well. I don't even know what the fuck's going on. So
no, that was bad.
But that's related to what we talk about all the time about the lineup fitting the contest. And Awesemo, probably one of the best ever large field GPP players, but and Empire Maker is, top cash game player. He just plays the narrow shit. I'm going to play the optimal lineup that I think, and you run me down. And I think maybe over a 100 Thunderdome sample size, maybe Awesemo, maybe the favorite. But after seeing his lineups, maybe he's not.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I thought once we saw the sports that Empire was definitely a decent favorite, but then also, like you said, I know I can just about guess what Empire's going to play on any given slate, so I know that Alex can figure it out too. But so I was like, I'm like, oh, this is a coin flip, and then it could, like you said, it could just be small sample variance, but based on the 9 or 10 or whatever slates that we've seen, I'm not sure he had much of a chance.
No, I mean, he didn't cash at all.
No, zero.
I mean, zero. Yeah. I mean, not. I mean, like nothing.
Yeah, he got fucking dog walked. It was bad. It was never close.
No, but I mean, I just expected. I expected more. I expected better. Well, I mean, but that's the difference between formats. I mean, you could be great at one and not so great in the other. You could. I mean, I readily admit that my weakness is in single entry and 3 max contests, because that's the type of game that I focus the least on. Not saying, I mean, I've done well in them. I mean, but because I'm very good at maximizing leverage and correlation, which is great for large field. And I'm great at, can I build the best median lineup, right? And then once you get right in the middle, it's I feel like I end up being too contrarian. Because I'm so concerned about, because I'm not, but you're playing the game changer. You're playing the 200 man contest. At least I'm playing the power sweep, 4,000. So it's still a big enough field, but I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I can't play Dalvin Cook, so I'm going to play Justin Jefferson. And then I'm going to play Drew Lock. I'm going to play Drew Lock, Judy, and Fant and run it back with Julio. It's okay, that sounds good. But then I can't play Cook in this lineup. And then I'm going to play David Johnson, but he's going to be owned. So I'm going to play the opposite side of the. I'm going to play. Like I'm making too many leverage points, and then I look at my
Right.
ownership and I go, yeah, I didn't have to be that contrarian. Like I didn't have to get that off the board to win this because like that. I look at the 3+1 that I played, and I look and it's like out of 4,000 entries, there's like 17 of them, right? So it's like there's
That
17 of these lineups, and I'm fading. And out of the 17 lineups, like 13 have Cook. So it's like now I'm one of 4 lineups that has no Cook and that stack, and I'm like I'm good. I'm
mhm,
like I could just play the best plays at that point, and then and
exactly.
then every week I do that, and I still make this. I still end up like, well, I got to pivot off of this guy, and I got to play correlate the defense, even though I should have played. Like it gets there sometimes, but to me, it's not a weakness. It's just that I'm creating too much variance in my lineup. So either I'm going to come in like really high or really low, but in that size field, I don't necessarily like if I'm going to win one of those contests, I'm going to end up with those lineups. I'm going to win by like 20 points. Right? It's going to be
Hmm.
one of those where your 2% owned guy and 3% owned stack, just outperforms everyone, and you're sitting there with like, wow, I'm glad yes, great. I won the spy, but I could have won the Millie Maker with this lineup, the way that it was
Yeah.
put together. So like at least like I'm improving to that extent. And that's why I think that the scope of this show, I know we didn't talk that much about the decision making that we did on this past slate, but uh I mean, look, I admitted that I made a mistake in cash games. I admitted that I'm working on getting better at single entry stuff. I'm still probably better than most people anyway. Uh, that learning, being open minded to learn. I was open minded to like maybe there's more of a football edge than it seems to be, and then I just take a look at the data over the past 2.5 years and go, dude, like you said, both me and you think that football is incredibly more random than people think. And then I look at the data and go, nope, it's twice as more than that.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I could say no, there has to be a pattern here. And no, actually, people are trying to make patterns. And then I try to make I go, okay, it's more likely that I play this type of lineups. And I go, nope, it's still even more random than that.
Yeah.
And once becomes to the point where it gets so random that like I'm just gonna take 10 plus years of data and just go, are they favored? Yes. What's the spread? 7 points. Give me the running back. Does the running back get 60+% of the for every percent, 10%, I want 1,000. So like that, like if he gets 60% of the snaps, I don't want to pay more than 6,000. If he gets 70% of the snaps, I don't want to pay more than 7,000. Like that isn't a hard rule, but like it kind of is. Kind of you look and you
Yeah.
go 10-point favorites against like I look at James Conner against the Cowboys and go, is he going to get 70% of the snaps? He's 6,900. Is he going to get 69% of the snaps? I think so. It turns out he didn't, but I mean, because they were behind, and they're a big favorite against the Cowboys. So give it to me. What football information do I need? Because I'm looking at 10 years worth of data going, this
Hmm.
is the most predictive that I could get. So let me just do that and not care about, well, if you look at his offensive tackle, he actually pulls more over here and his guard, like you're going to be wrong. Half the time you're going to be right. Half the time you're going to be wrong. Why am I studying that?
Yeah. I think it's like the perfect summary of kind of this conversation, and probably even like the biggest takeaway from this year. It kind of summarizes the confirmation bias stuff we're talking about, like the running back stuff we're talking about, is that, and then the football guy stuff we're talking about, right? Like we even had this discussion. Like I'm a little bit more of like a football guy to you or than you, but all this shit, like we just spent a ton of time talking about all this DFS related stuff, and we're still trying to figure all this shit out,
Right.
and like we're studying this constantly. We're admitting how much randomness there is. We're admitting things that we fucked up. Like you can't possibly cover all these incredibly important DFS concepts, right? Especially because they're evolving. Like the running back thing, it's evolving. Like it's changing. The shit that you did, we would do 2 years ago is irrelevant now, or borderline irrelevant now. So there's just not enough edge in, like you said, grinding and like I watch the games, but like I'm not trying to spend all my time grinding the all 22 because I can't extract enough edge out of it when look at all the shit that we just went through, and look at all the things that we've talked about for weeks now on this show, different subjects. You can't like spending your time figuring all that stuff out because it's like I said, it's going to keep evolving and you're going to have to keep learning. We're still learning. We're making mistakes every single week. We're just trying to share the information that we're learning as we go. Like spending your time on that, like the perfect summary of this episode, like you're going to get so much more valuable, so much more valuable information. You're going to become so much of a better DFS player and you're going to start to make a whole lot more money than, spending 2 days out of your week rewatching every football game.
Right. And people spend their time watching every football game, like on Monday or Tuesday, right? You know what I do on Monday and Tuesday? I'm looking through results DB. Like like people today's Tuesday, and there are already people in RG's Discord going, so what are we thinking about so and so on Sunday's slate? And I'm like, I've made a dummy lineup just so I could create head-to-heads in the lobby. Like I look through and I see, okay, that if McCaffrey's out, Davis is going to be fucking mega chalk. Looking at that type of shit. But then no, how much can I learn from this past slate? Any hypothesis that I made overall for the course of the season, does it fit with what happened last week? And now I need to compare it to the week before and the week before and the week before. I'm looking at sharp GPP players and seeing, are they adapting? So I'm looking at some of the, I'm like, okay, I see that a lot of played David Johnson, a lot of played David Montgomery, a lot of them played the cheap running backs and forego the high price running backs. I want to see that trend. So let me go back to week 1. Let me go back to week 2, and I'm looking at the same person. I'm seeing, did Utica, how did he change? Has he always thought this? Is it primarily these types of things? And I go to, Brick 75, and I go, okay, let me take a look. I go to Awesemo. I basically go to the top RG leaderboard for the top 50 and just look Giant Squid, whoever, Petty Theft, and just go down and go, has their approach changed? Like, just to see if, did I identify a trend? Or am I wrong? Or did other people not? I have to assume that there's some wisdom of the crowds that, I always take a look at the top 50 or whoever, the top GPP players, because, if I had a chance to change to trade their ROI for my ROI over the course of a year, I would in an instant. Just, give me your lineups and let me just do that.
Right.
So that's why I look at those guys and go, what are they, in aggregate, not one, but 20, 30? You have to assume that 20 or 30 most profitable GPP players in the world, are more likely to identify something than them all missing it. That's how I'm trying to prove my hypothesis, by going, this is what I believe. Let me see if 50 people that are more profitable than I am, more volume, that have more skin in the game than I do even, and I have plenty of skin in the game, are what they're finding and how they're playing match up with what I'm trying to do? And if the answer is yes, I'm more likely to be right in that instance than by watching tape or something, by looking at that. But if I see, it could be that I look at that and I go, well, barely anyone is. It's less likely that 50 top players have just, not done it. Nope, they're paying up. Nope, Saquon, jam him in. Those McCaffrey, jam him in, 40%, 40%, double pay up at running back. And then I have to think to myself, maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm more likely to be wrong now than have to outsmarted 50 of the best competitors in my field.
Right.
So, but that's the reason you go through results DB and not, I'm studying, my all 22 is results DB. Everyone's studying the players on the field. I'm studying the players in my contests, because I believe I could find more of an edge by, they're doing this thing too often, or that I'm looking in the power sweep or something, going, the field is doing this too often, to this less often. I see 3 guys based on their past 4 weeks worth of spy lineups are also trying to exploit the same thing that I am. They haven't gotten success yet exploiting in a similar direction, and I have. But they're gonna hit. One of these guys is gonna hit. I'm gonna look and go, oh, they're noticing that the ownership is that they're, I notice who's playing Justin Jefferson in the spy. I know who's playing Adam Thielen in the spy, like off of the Dalvin Cook chalk. I know who's playing Russell Gage, right? And it's not like who played Russell Gage this week. It's okay. This guy played Justin Jefferson. Let me take a look at last week. Who was the chalkiest guy last week? And let me take a look at now this user's. Oh, they also played the wide receiver negatively correlated to the running back. And then I look at the week before. Oh, they also play like oh, okay. They're just they're playing at 17 weeks. One of these times, bang, leverage play, and there you go. Especially in these single entry contests where guys, I mean, look, the game changer. Julio was 50% owned, right? In the power sweep, he was 35% owned. In the large field contest, he was like 25% owned. So you gained so much. Lockett was 43% owned in the game changer. He was like if you played Metcalf in the game changer was 2.83% owned. Okay? So if you just played Allen, Diggs, Metcalf over Allen, Diggs, Lockett, you probably cashed. I mean, like that alone got you to minimum cash, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to get everything else right and you won. But you couldn't do that in the large field stuff because Metcalf was more owned and Lockett was less owned, because people play crappier lineups and whatever. And this ownership condenses in the game changer. I'm looking through the game changer to see what users are trying to benefit on that, and if enough of them are, and who's doing it. Because most likely, it's going to be the same types of people. Who's the chalk donkeys in that contest? I'm not saying that they're donkeys, but who's playing the chalk more likely than not, and who's not? And am I looking to it? And maybe you find that most of the top 50 players are playing the chalk, and maybe I'm over valuing leverage, but based on my findings, I'm not. So I mean that's kind of the whole point of the show. So instead of grinding the tape, grind results DB, or there are other sites that have you could look at past slates, and so it's not just roto grinders. So you're able to do that elsewhere.
I just think even as a quote unquote more of a football guy that I am, it's like there's nothing wrong with like wanting to watch the tape, or like I said, I do try to pull a couple of little football things throughout the course of the year, right? Like I use a football take here and there, but your like example with results DB is like an overarching point of what our priorities should be with spending our time and our process and all of that. There's nothing wrong with, at the end of the day, right? If there's some 2% guy that you're like, oh my God, I saw something and this is what I have to play. And every once in a while that does happen. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. And what matters is repeating, like you said, repeating this DFS process, repeating playing this game the right way over 17 plus weeks. That's where you should be spending the overwhelming majority of your time. And then, if you want to get your hand in the dirt a little bit like I like to sometimes, by all means, have some fun. If that's what you like to do, that's fine. But I think we talked about it earlier that people really need to kind of take a step back and realize, like I said, I fucked this up for a long time and lost a lot before I realized what your real priority should be in learning DFS. And I think everybody be way better off. I think you'll see unreal results, like way quicker, spending all your time kind of studying results DB and studying just the overall game theory aspect of things than you will, like you said, the left guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers is, going to whoop the defensive tackle's ass. Like, none of that shit really matters, even if you think it does.
Right. And you could get you could get that education with the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. Coming up Christmas time, you can get it as a Christmas present or something, or for the cost of it, it's an evergreen piece of content. You could listen to this 5 years as long as DFS is around. It's evergreen. You could listen to this. I've gotten emails of people that I'm already on my third time listening through, and every time that I listen through, I pick up new things, and I implement that. And like, I played that slate before, and I saw, now that I re-heard that, I realized what my mistake was, or I implemented that and I got 8th place in a GPP. I've never gotten this high in a GPP before. And now, I mean, if I got now your apps, and people said, I know why the people have replied, I know why you're so upset at some of these questions. Right? Because they like now I'm making lineups that make so much more sense. And it's not about the players that I pick. Like, I'm making good lineups for outcomes. And that's like, yeah, and they say to me, like, yeah, for 3 years I've been asking people on streams, like, should I play this guy or this guy? And you're absolutely right. That's such the dumb fucking question, because without context, that other than who do you think is going to do well, and you're a fortune telling, like, why does that have to do with your lineup at all? Mm-hmm. And you can't answer it. So like, this is the type of stuff that's in the course. You could follow Erik at Erik Beimfohr, Erik with a K.
Nailed it.
Right,
Nailed it.
Erik Beimfohr. Yep. Which send him a wedding present of what wedding gifts can we send you?
We have like all the household shit. So
just how about alcohol? Why don't we just say
anything? I was gonna say the two most important things in my life now are gambling and alcohol, because we have all the random shit around the house. So any combination, anything in that realm, there we go. I'll be good with that.
Right, Matt. Did Matt send you?
Of course. Matt sent a household item. How fucked up is that?
Matt has kidding me? The Matt guy that would have with more whiskey that you'd have nothing to do with, and he sent you household items?
Yeah, it was bullshit. Like, we got the gift in. Alyssa's opening it, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is from Matt? Where's my whiskey?
Right. You expected some 50-year-old something, small batch something or other, right? And it's just like, oh, great, spatulas. We don't need spatula racks. Come on. We could live without anything. We could live without utensils as long as we have alcohol. Yeah. So you could follow me at BlenderHD on Twitter or theoryofdfs.com. Send in your questions at theoryofdfs.com. I've been responding. I could respond via email. We have stuff for the show. And same for Twitter. But I mean, email is so much. I could save it better in email so I could remember it. But I replied to pretty much DMs and everything, as long as you're not asking player questions or like on this individual lineup. Like, I'm not playing for you. Like, I don't like being your butler of like, oh, this is my lineup for tomorrow's slate. Do you think I should play? Like I'll answer strategy questions, but like, you have to. Don't tell me what players you're playing, or should I play like that's you're it's like a football coach going to the opposite sideline and go, do you think I should run a draw play here against your defense? Or like, we're kind of playing against each other. So like, after the fact, we could have that conversation. Like, if you wanted like Monday, like, oh, what do you think of my line? Okay, at least then it's like, well, maybe you should have correlated this better, or just it looks good. Okay, you just didn't get there. So you could do that. Questions at theoryofdfs.com, and send all the whiskey you can to Erik. You could DM me for an address or something. I didn't send you anything. Am I supposed to? Am I supposed to send you a wedding gift?
Well, now you have to. Now that you brought it up.
What should I send you? I should send you a head-to-head invite. That's what I should.
There you go. Send me a one. Yeah, send me a 1K.
We'll no, I'm not. No, you're not worth that much. No, I'll send you. I'll send you a $5 head-to-head, and I'll make sure I'll make sure that lineup I never late swap. So like now Perfect. You got a little EV off of me. I'm sending you just a tad bit of EV. That if I'm telling you, especially for this coming week, when we have 5 games, 6 games, we're gonna play a $5 head-to-head. I'm serious about this. I'm gonna send you a $5 head-to-head for whatever lineup would you play in the SPY, whatever contest you're in, and I guarantee that I will not late swap that lineup. So
I'm playing all afternoon players.
Oh, you are. I mean,
that's what I'll do.
Well, you know how much EV you're getting off of that? It's probably 20 cents. So
yeah,
but if I'm giving out EV, that means you know that you mean something to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week on the Theory of DFS podcast.